Got a story for you today. There was a woman who had just had her son and her husband died. And she took all of her grief and all of her hopes and all of her love and she poured them on her son. He was everything to her and she wanted his life to be blessed just more than any other life. She went to the local physician, and he was about 3 years old, to have a checkup, and he was doing just fine. And the physician asked her, said to her, "You know, I have the ability to grant you one wish. Whatever you want, it will be so. All you have to do is ask. What would you like for your son?" And she said, "I wish that everybody would love my son the way I love him." Well, the physician looked at her for some time, and then he finally said, "It is so." Well, everyone did love Benjamin. Benjamin was the delight for everybody. They would come by in the street. They would ooh and ah over him. He'd go to the store and the grocer would give him candy. Everybody had a present for him. All the kids in schools loved being around Benjamin. He was the most wonderful person in their lives. And he got a little spoiled because everything went his way. The teachers couldn't bear to give him an F. So they gave him A's, and he just slid right through school, didn't learn a darn thing. He got into high school. All the girls wanted to be with him. All the guys hated his guts. But they loved him. And they couldn't help it. And he was miserable. And he got cocky and obnoxious. And he was rotten. He was so rotten and so sad. His mother just couldn't stand it. And she took sick and passed away. He didn't have a friend in the world. He was totally alone. Except for this old physician. He would see him on the street, and the physician did not seem to love him like everyone else. Kind of called him on it. Finally, he got to the place where Benjamin would go to the physician's office, to his place, and he would visit with him and talk with him and express how miserable he was. This went on for some time. He couldn't keep a job. He would get a job real easy, but he couldn't keep it, and he lived in a small town, so this only happens a few times, and he couldn't get work, and he was terribly lost. And he says, "I don't know what's wrong with me." And the physician said, "Well, I have to apologize to you. I made this happen. Your mother was given one wish, and I granted it for her." Well, what did she wish? That I'd be miserable and hurting all my life? No. What she wished was that everybody would love you as much as she loved you. Now, I can't take away that wish, but I could give you one. Well, Benjamin almost didn't hear that. He stormed out of the door, and he was so upset with his mom. He was upset with the physician. He was upset with the whole world. And he stewed in that for some time. He finally drugged himself back, and he said, "Doc, I do have a wish. I wish that you make it so that nobody loves me like they did, but that I love everybody." The doctor said, "Are you sure?" And Benjamin said, "Yeah." The doctor said, "It's so." Well, he walked out the door, and immediately people were yelling at him and cursing him because they had spent so much energy loving him. They now hated him. And it was okay because he loved them. He thought about them. He thought about each person in town. He finally got a job. He got a job as a janitor at the school, and he loved that job. He loved being around the kids. of sharing with them and their craziness and their joys and their struggles, because they knew they could talk to him because he loved them. He met a woman, Darlene, single mom, widowed. They got married. He adopted their daughter, and they lived, you might say, happily ever after. Last I heard, Darlene's in college, the daughter's in college, and Benjamin and Darlene are just living out their days in love. Deep, real, joyous love. Now, in our world, we do not understand love. If you watch television, what you see that passes for love is almost never love. It is usually the idea of falling in love. Well, that's much more exciting for us. We like the idea of falling in love. It's a wonderful feeling. I hope everybody's done that at least once in their lives. Fallen in love. It is delightful. It's wonderful. It's not love. Back in college, I had a friend who would look at a pretty girl and says, I really want to fall in lust with her. He named it. That's what it is. It's a delightful way of people getting together and then making promises that they really wouldn't have made otherwise. Like, well, there's a picture of us coming down the aisle after getting married, after saying the I do's. And the look on my eyes is like that of a deer looking into headlights, because I suddenly realized what I'd said I do. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, till death do us part. Wow. I mean, no 21-year-old in his right mind would make that promise. But we do, because we have fallen in love. And it's a joyous thing for about a couple weeks, months, maybe a year. All the gals are going, yeah, I know what that means. And then comes the real part of it. We have to learn how to love. And nothing teaches us love like having to live with somebody else. Nothing. Because love is the will to extend yourself for your or another's spiritual growth. It's not a feeling. There is a feeling of love, but that's not what love is. And it's not infatuation. Infatuation's fun. It gets us here. But it really is a will. It's a decision. It's a direction that we make to extend ourselves. You know, I've seen situations where somebody really tries to love somebody who's not particularly lovable. And you can hear the creaking noise as they keep pulling themselves wider and wider and wider. You felt this with your spouse? You extend yourself until you can accept them the way they are. And in doing so, you have done everything in your power to increase their spiritual growth, and in the process, you have increased your own. That's love. That is not what was happening to Benjamin when everybody loved him. And you'll notice anytime there's a story about a love potion, it always goes wrong, because it's not about the will and it's not about self-extension. Love. We cannot really feel love unless we're loving. And we could not be loving at all except that we are loved. You are loved in your very creation. God put love in your heart. God's love never stops. But it's my observation there's a lot of people who have no idea what that means. because they have no idea what love means and what love is. You see, God extended God's self to create you. We like to think of God as perfect and all-encompassing and incapable of being anything greater, but God constantly increases God's self, extends God's self for your benefit, for your spiritual growth. Every blessing you receive is offered to you for your spiritual growth. Every struggle you receive, every pain in the back you receive is yours so that you might extend yourself and grow. And therefore, learn the meaning of life. Love the Lord your God with all your mind, heart and soul and mind and might. And love your neighbor as yourself. It does start off with loving ourselves, looking at ourselves absolutely honestly, incredibly honestly. Every wart, every bump, every bruise, every mistake has to be understood and admitted and accepted. But that is part of the stretching toward loving yourself. It's hard. And yet the value is priceless. In Christianity, we always start with confession. Well, we start with praising God, but in the praising of God, we come to the realization we need to be honest about yourselves. We have not been loving towards God. We have not been loving towards our neighbors, and we need to remember that and to ask God's forgiveness that we may try yet again to continue to extend ourselves. This kind of love is the only measure of human life. When you think back on the life of somebody who has passed, and you remember the grouchies and the funnies and the problems, you also remember the love. How the person loved others and extended themselves for others. And that is the measure. Nothing else really matters. And the second reason for this kind of love is that you experience and know the free, unmerited, unconditional gift from God in your creation. You are born and you live to love. Nothing else is important. Everything else is possible because of love.